So in this video, what I actually want to talk about is kind of a raw, sort of mental outburst of ideas of why I think Bitcoin is actually a pretty good investment. Now, obviously this is not investment advice and I'm not encouraging anyone to invest in Bitcoin if you don't understand it. And that's exactly why I want to talk about it, because honestly, the last 3 weeks or so, I've been listening for at least 2 to 3 hours every single day, either listening or reading to different kind of speakers, authors, investors on the topic of Bitcoin. Because if you've been watching my channel, you might know that I have quite a big position in Bitcoin. In fact, after real estate, it's actually my biggest position in my whole portfolio. So when I bought it at the time, to be honest, I kind of followed the herd. I bought it because, everybody was buying it. It was kind of the right thing to do at the time. I think I got in just around 2020. I got really serious about Bitcoin. So not really at the cheapest price, but still obviously lower than it is today. But now with recent increase in price again, having just recently crossed the all-time high for the price of Bitcoin, I once again found myself kind of FOMO in there. I said, should I invest more in it or less? Should I sell right now and take profits? And I really wanted to understand more about what it actually is. On the technical side, I may not be the best expert to describe that. I think there are much smarter people out there. It's the same. You can invest into Apple as the company and understand the logic of it and the direction they're going, while not be able to explaining exactly what the iPhone does, right? How it all works. But the fundamental strengths of a company, in this case of an asset, Bitcoin, I really wanted to understand it and think, should I be investing more in it or not? So that's why I want to share with you a few of the thoughts that I have around the topic and why I think I will definitely be now going forward, continuing to dollar cost average my way into it to build up a bigger position over time. I still continue to invest into my dividend stocks, but definitely I will be investing more into Bitcoin going forward. Despite the price being high, I think long term we're only going to be looking back and seeing, wow, at 70K it was actually pretty cheap deal. So for me, and like many other investors in Bitcoin, the biggest endorsement was actually recently when ETFs in the US were approved. Spot ETFs, not future ETFs we had in the past, but spot ETFs, basically allowing retail investors like you and me in the US to invest through trusted money managers like BlackRock, for example, to invest into Bitcoin. Because let's face it, it's still not very easy, right? When I speak to some of my friends or even family members, they say, well, maybe I want to invest into Bitcoin, but it seems so complicated. And then if I have to take it off the exchange, how do I do that, right? Cold storage, what is that? It is a little bit difficult to get started, I get it. So in that way, investing into an ETF, which many of you guys are doing already, it's much more easy, right? You can do that through your brokerage online, and that makes it so much easier and more accessible for many people. And not just retail investors, in a way more importantly, big financial institutions, pension funds, or other big institutions that otherwise couldn't invest into Bitcoin now have the ability to do so. And I think that brings a huge inflow of liquidity on the one hand side, because more people want to buy it. I think there is a desire to own it. On the other side, I also think it brings more legitimacy to the project, because in the beginning, let's be honest, when it all started, you could buy a Bitcoin for $5. Nobody really thought it would be worth anything in the future. Nobody took it serious. But now that it reached a certain price and more serious investors and institutions invest into it, people think, maybe it is not a scam after all. As more bigger players come in, others see that as a proof of concept that it is something legit to invest in. And I think it's a good thing in the long term of Bitcoin. And that very nicely brings me to the next point, and that is the Veblen effect. Basically, the Veblen effect means that any good that appreciates in price leads to more demand. Think about some designer handbags or highly exclusive watches. The higher the price is, the more desirable it comes and more people want it. So it's kind of the counterintuitive effect in a way. That's called the Veblen effect. And I believe the same might be true, or is already true in a way, for Bitcoin. The higher it gets, the more people feel like, oh my God, I want to get in. It seems to be serious. The same, honestly, happened to me as well, right? Now that I see it going up and you hear people talking about potentially hitting 150, 200, half a million, 1 million per Bitcoin, who knows? Of course, you think, if that's the case, I still want to get in. I still want to participate. So the idea here is very simple. The higher the price is, the more desirable it comes and more people want to participate. Imagine the price of Bitcoin going to 500,000. A lot of people have that FOMO. Now they think it's really getting serious. I want to get into it, and they will invest. That will further drive up the price. So the fact that it's limited in supply makes it very special and rare. So long term, that will only continue to drive the price up. And that brings me to yet another important point, and that's the impact of inflation. Because inflation, when you think about money, really has a bad effect. I mean, most of the money that you have is subject to inflation. I mean, 100,000 euros that you have today in 10 years from now will be worth significantly less than they are today. And that's because of inflation. The government just keeps on printing more money, and that lowers the money that you have and own and can use to purchase things. And that's actually really bad. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when I was still much younger, 50 euros for me, wow, that was a lot of money, right? Right now, 50 euros, what you can buy with 50 euros? I mean, often a lunch is 50 euros. And I think 10 years from now, you won't have a lunch for 50 euros because it might be worth 100 euros. So that just shows you that inflation is a real thing. It's something we have to really consider. And that happens because the government just keeps on printing more money, and that lowers the share that you have. So the smartest thing is to invest your money to at least preserve the value of your money. If you invested into some stocks or S&P 500, let's say S&P 500 over the last 30 years on average, you get an 8-9% return. But now we had inflation of 4, 5, 6%. So let's say 6%, you actually only grew your money by 2% every year. And yeah, that's not really impressive numbers when you think about it. That's why people look to Bitcoin, because we've seen over the last years much higher growth, outperforming all other asset classes in terms of growth, to have potential better preserving of your wealth and growing your wealth in the future rather than being subject to inflation. And here we don't have inflation with Bitcoin, but you actually have a deflationary pressure, because you can never have more than 21 million Bitcoins out there. It's hard programmed into the Bitcoin blockchain. And that's really, really smart, because that way you can't print more, right? Like we can do with fiat money, your euros or dollars, what have you. The governments just keep on printing, and that lowers your purchasing power. The same with real estate. Actually, when you think about it, Dubai is a great example. They sell you the dream with a sea view property. Amazing, you love it, you pay top dollars for it. And guess what? 2 years later, they're doing that already. They're building a little island in front of you. Your sea view is blocked. And then those people can be sold the dream once again. They're in front of you. They're creating islands. So they're basically creating more real estate, and that brings more supply to the market, which keeps the prices low. And I think that's really important. There are not many asset classes out there that have a deflationary component to it. Bitcoin is actually one of the very few, if not the only one, that I can think of right now. I think that's a huge point to consider when making your investment choices. Another great point about Bitcoin is the fact that it's highly liquid and mobile. Tell me any other asset classes that you can sell or buy any time of the day. Crypto markets never sleep. They operate 24/7, 365 days a year. Even stocks, for example, right? They only operate Monday to Friday, certain hours. If there's national holidays and you need money to sell the shares, well, you can't, because you have to wait until the markets open again. The same with gold, right? Let's say you move to another country, you look at a house you want to buy and you need the funds, but your gold is back home in Switzerland. You know, what you're going to do? You're not going to call your banker overnight that keeps your gold for you to sell it and liquidate it and send the money. That process will take days, if not weeks, until you have your money in your bank account in your new country, right? So Bitcoin is definitely one of the fastest and most liquid forms of investments that you can have, because it's available anytime. Best of all, you can have it on your mobile phone app, or ideally on a cold hardware wallet that you can take with you anywhere you go. If your country that you live in has unfavorable laws or starts taxing or banning Bitcoin, guess what? You take your hardware wallet and you move to another country and you can do what you want to do over there. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin, which once again is going to be so much more difficult with real estate or gold. Try to bring all your gold to another country. That's going to be quite a mission, especially the larger your gold amounts get. The fact that you can take self-custody is just amazing. Once again, imagine you have $500,000 sitting in your bank account. Try get that money in cash paid to you. And then what do you do with this cash? Most countries these days don't allow cash transactions over 5,000 euros anymore. You know, what you going to do with all your cash, right? And yeah, it's just not going to be as good as Bitcoin is. Another important point is, of course, the upcoming halving, which basically reduces the rewards that miners are getting for producing Bitcoin. So every 4 years, that is taking place. And that's actually pretty smart, because as technology advances, you know, those miners could create Bitcoin even faster, but by having more difficult calculations that they have to do in order to get the same reward, you know, it makes it more difficult and keeps things in place. So that's actually really smartly programmed. And traditionally, for the last 3 halving, before and just after the halving process, the prices shoot up. So obviously now there's a lot of excitement with upcoming halving sometime in April, and I think prices probably will, you know, respond positively to that. But long term, I believe it's just one of the catalysts. There's so many other components now that are more relevant than just the halving process. And by 2030, 32, 34, I believe, we'll have mined more than 99% of all the available Bitcoin in the world. So by that time, honestly, the supply really won't make a change anymore, but then demand will make all the change, because people will start, you know, fighting over each other how much Bitcoin you can have. So if I want to have more Bitcoin, I will have to buy it from you or somebody else, and therefore pay a higher price, because for anyone buying, the other person has to sell in the first place. And I think that will bring the price only one way, and that is up. So I'm really looking at long-term benefits and price development of Bitcoin, not in the next few years. Yes, these halving cycles are nice, but I'm not trading, right? I will continue to buy at higher prices and at lower prices. But long term, that's where I position myself with my investment portfolio to benefit from the price appreciation. And another great point that I'm really happy with is seeing the narrative around Bitcoin slowly starting to change. I mean, just look at one of the most powerful bankers in the world, the CEO and chairman of JP Morgan, one of the biggest, if not the biggest bank in the world, was always such a critic of Bitcoin. But recently he came out and said, well, why he personally doesn't endorse Bitcoin or doesn't buy it. He understands people doing it. That's already a huge improvement, right? The same with BlackRock. I mean, they used to bash Bitcoin so badly. Now they are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, ETF provider for Bitcoin, and they monetize it. So they start liking it and talking positively about it. So that's really good to see that narrative change. Because imagine, while you and me may not be affected by people talking badly about it, in fact, it might encourage more people to kind of go after it. Overall, you want more people to enter the space, right? More demand drives the prices up. So if everybody speaks highly about it, like they do with gold, right? I mean, how many people speak negatively about gold? You may not like it, but people don't speak negatively about it. And you want the same effect happening with Bitcoin. And I think slowly, we're still not there, but slowly there's a change happening. And when you hear the news, people talk more positively about it. They make fun about all these meme coins and other coins, which, rightfully so. Maybe again, I'm missing out on that, but I also have my doubts about those things. But I think Bitcoin has such a strong network effect already that really established itself as its own asset class. So I think it's really good that we see that changing in narrative in a positive direction. Another big point that people always say negative about Bitcoin is the volatility, which, obviously when you look at the past few years, yes, price has been very volatile. Up and down, which is funny when you think about it, because people like it because the price goes up, but at the same time it's only natural that the price also goes down, because nothing in life ever only goes up, right? It's natural to have volatility. Like any share or stock company in the beginning is very volatile. Look at Tesla, I mean, it's very volatile. Look at Nvidia, all of those are volatile in both ways, right? Which can be good if you're a trader, but for long term I understand that people will be a little bit cautious. At the same time, I think also now that Bitcoin matures, let's be honest, it's still less than 20 years old, very young, but now that more institutional money comes in, ETF, these kind of people, they will bring so much liquidity that any drop in price will quickly be bought up, because people want to invest into it. They don't care if you invest at 70,000 or at 100,000. They anyways just want to hold more Bitcoin, because there won't be more Bitcoin in the world. So the more you acquire now, the better you're off in the future, because who knows, I might be sitting here 2 years from now when the price is 200,000, I might say, my goodness, I should have bought more at 70,000, right? So yes, while it's still a little bit more volatile, more than let's say Coca-Cola or some other, dividend stocks, definitely, I think long term it will be less volatile, but that also means both directions. I also don't think it's going to 10x within a couple of weeks, right? So that's also not anymore the case how it used to be, but at the same time, the downside is also more protected. Another point I hear a lot is when people say, well, yeah, Bitcoin might be good for now, but governments are coming up with their own digital currency, the digital dollar, the digital yuan, which we're already seeing in China. And yes, I absolutely believe that's going to happen, right? Physical money will disappear and we're going to have digital currency to transact. But I think that doesn't have to compete with each other. It can just go in parallel. Same how we have the dollar now and gold as a reserve asset. In the future, you might still have your fiat currency in the form of digital coins. Rather than that being gold-backed, I believe it will be Bitcoin-backed. That will be the reserve currency, an asset in the digital space, because I don't think in 50 years from now, when we're going to live in the metaverse and so on, people still going to be hoarding the physical gold at home. The idea might be romantic, but I think as the baby boomers are moving out, the young generation, myself included, I couldn't care less about gold. For me, it has 0 point. I would prefer Bitcoin any day over gold. So I don't think those two digital coins are directly competing with Bitcoin. I think they complement each other quite nicely. So that brings me to my next point, and that's actually a really interesting one, which once again I have to refer back to Michael Saylor, where he was asked in the interview, so what do you do with all your Bitcoin? You acquire them, and then what do you do, right? You can't live in them, you can't look at them because they're digitally in the blockchain. What do you actually do with them? And he made a great point saying that, when people bought real estate, in the 80s or 90s in New York, Manhattan, you did that to obviously have it, to own it, and preserve and grow your wealth for generations. You would pass it on to generations. You didn't plan to hold this apartment and flip it 1 or 2 years later, right? The same is true with Bitcoin. You have it as a store of value to grow, preserve it over time, because we have the deflationary component in there. Over time, it can only appreciate in value, one way or the other, unless it's completely abolished. But otherwise, it has to go up in price. And the cool thing is, what you can do, you can use that as a collateral, right? You can borrow against it. For example, with my crypto exchange of choice, Nexo, I can borrow against my Bitcoin. If I have, for example, 10,000 euros worth of Bitcoin sitting there, I can borrow up to 50% without any permission or approval. I can just take that money out with my bank card, pay for something at 0% interest if I'm at the highest level of loyalty with them. and basically use the money free of charge and then pay it back whenever I want within 1 year period. And that's it. I never had to sell my Bitcoin, because you don't want to be the guy, remember, who bought the pizza, I think it was a couple of years ago, with 12 or 20 Bitcoins at a time, which would now be worth hundreds of thousands of euros. As we know that the price of Bitcoin will go up long term, why would you want to sell them to pay for something right now, right? You want to preserve it, you would accumulate more of it and then borrow against it. I think it's such a smart way, and actually also a very tax advantaged way, because you don't technically sell it, therefore you don't have to pay taxes on any sales of the crypto, you just borrow against it, so you won't have to pay taxes on that. So that's another huge benefit. And the last point I want to make in this video goes back to education around the topic, because a lot of people are quick to say that, you know, it is a scam and I don't understand that, it doesn't make sense, and what is it? It's not a store of value, it has no meaning at all, it has no value at all. And you know, it was so funny, once again, Michael Saylor saying the same in an interview. He said, you know, just think of electricity. Every year, unfortunately, thousands of people are being electrocuted from electricity by pure accidents, right? And these things are bad. So on the one hand side, you could ban electricity and say it's bad for humanity because, you know, people obviously pass away from it, you know. That would probably not be the smartest, because electricity really propelled humanity forwards. It has so many obvious benefits. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing this video and I couldn't report it in the first place. Now, the better thing is to learn from it, how we can mitigate and reduce those risks, but use it to our advantage. And the same is true with Bitcoin, right? If you just dismiss it, but never actually bother to educate around the topic, you know, that's very easy. But I think a smarter way is to at least dedicate some of your time towards learning more about it. It doesn't mean you have to buy it, and maybe after doing all your research, you still don't like it, and that's totally fine, right? But I don't think it's the smartest idea to just dismiss something because you have a bad feeling about it. I mean, investing based on feelings, usually never the smartest approach, right? If you're happy with the other investments, that's totally fine, but just understand that the landscape is changing, right? When 50 years ago, Coca-Cola was an amazing growth company, that's great. You know, in another 50 years, will Coca-Cola be still returning above market returns? I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe not, right? So the world is changing and you want to go with them. Doesn't mean you have to follow everything and every hype train. I'm not investing into Nvidia, for example, but understanding and learning more about Bitcoin, I think, can be a really, really important thing to do. Doesn't mean you have to understand the inner workings of Bitcoin, but just the value proposition, what it offers, the benefits, and if you find any drawbacks, if there are any, I think it doesn't have really too many. That way you can come up with your own decision and make your own call. In my case, after having now really rigorously studied it, read a lot of books, the Bitcoin Standard, I can really recommend you. Amazing book around this topic. Listen to so many podcasts, Michael Saylor interviews, and yeah, I think I have a really good understanding now why I like Bitcoin and what I do for myself going forward. I will still continue investing into stocks and ETFs, definitely, but I will now also continue to dollar cost average every single week into Bitcoin. So yes, I will be buying right now at 70,000 euros, and I will be buying at 80,000, 90,000 and 100,000 euros, but I will also be buying if it goes down to 40 or maybe 30,000, which, you know, may or may not happen, I don't know, but nobody knows. And that's the same with stocks, right? You know, you can't time the market, but be in the market long term. I think if I do the same video 5 years from now, 70,000 will be a bargain, and I wish I would have bought more at that price point. So I don't want to be in that position. I want to, along the way, continue to invest in it, build a bigger position. And I'm only talking about Bitcoin because a lot of the other coins, even Ethereum, yes, I understand has different use cases and so on, but the fact that it doesn't have a hard cap to it means that it can be printed in perpetuity, same as we do with the euros and dollars. So for me, a lot of the points that I spoke about in this video are not there in most of the other coins, and that's why I'm really bullish on Bitcoin. When you look at the dominance in the crypto market, also Bitcoin's dominance has been growing over the years, not shrinking. So that once again shows me that people are more into Bitcoin. And once you have the strong network effect, it's hard to go away from it. Same with YouTube, right? I could create my own video platform now and try to convince you to watch it over there, but try to compete with YouTube, it's going to be very tough. So once people are comfortable with one network, I think they're going to stay there. Again, I don't know about the next 100 years, but the next 10, 20 years, I definitely don't see anything changing about that. So the fact that you're still here watching me rambling on for so long about the topic of Bitcoin means a lot. Really appreciate it. But I'm really happy to hear from you as well, because I know Bitcoin can be a very controversial topic. Some people like it, some people really don't like it at all. So let me know what you think about it, what you plan to do with it. You like it, you don't like it, do you prefer other asset classes? Let me know in the comments down below. I get back to every single one of you. I love to have a bit of discussion around this topic. Next up, check out this video over here. As always, guys, stay healthy, get wealthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.